It started out as the kind of winter forecast you scroll right past without a second thought. Just a couple of inches of snow and a bit of wind. Typical stuff for Ontario this time of year. People were joking about it around the water cooler, grabbing a few extra groceries, and making plans for the evening. Everyone thought it was business as usual. But up above the clouds, the atmosphere was already shifting gears. A massive storm, one that would eventually put the entire region into a deep freeze, was quietly coming together. The first clues didn't show up in the headlines. They were subtle. Pilots were calling in reports of unusual turbulence. Long-haul truckers noticed the winds shifting direction and picking up serious speed. Weather stations watched the barometric pressure drop way faster than the models predicted. Even the animals seemed restless. Meteorologists found themselves staring at their monitors a little longer than normal, watching bands of moisture twist and tighten over the Great Lakes. It was like the storm was taking a deep breath before the scream. Then the switch flipped. Temperatures plummeted in what felt like minutes. The rain instantly hardened into ice. And when the snow finally arrived, it didn't fall gently. It came in sideways, driven by winds strong enough to rattle windows and completely erase entire cities into a white void. Roads just vanished. The horizon disappeared. Power grids started failing, knocking out one neighborhood after another. What had started as a nothing-to-worry-about forecast had quietly morphed into a province-wide emergency. Drivers were trapped in their cars. The lights went black. Airports filled up with stranded travelers huddled under blankets. Emergency crews tried to push out into the storm, but the conditions were so bad they couldn't even see the hoods of their own trucks. For thousands of people, the longest night of the year had just begun. This is the story of how a standard winter weather report spiraled into a crisis. We'll look at how the warning signs were missed, how the storm intensified faster than anyone thought possible, and how ordinary people survived the night Ontario froze. Because sometimes, disasters don't announce themselves with loud sirens. They arrive softly, and by the time you actually notice them, they are already here. In the days leading up to the storm, absolutely nothing about the forecast sounded dangerous. Local stations were calling for snow showers, gusty winds, and just your typical winter conditions. The graphics on the screen showed that light blue shading over Ontario, the kind viewers had seen 100 times before. People went ahead and made plans, booked their travel, and joked about winter being no big deal. Felt routine. And honestly, that was the most dangerous part. Meteorologists later admitted that the computer models hinted at something bigger, but they didn't fully agree with one another. A few late-night updates showed the pressure dropping much quicker than expected. It looked like a warm front and an Arctic cold front were about to collide directly over the province, but the timing was still uncertain. Forecast discussions used careful language, tossing around phrases like potential for intensification and conditions may deteriorate rapidly. But for most people, those words sounded abstract, not like an alarm bells. On the ground, however, subtle warning signs were already appearing. The wind didn't just blow, it shifted, turning sharper and colder with every passing hour. Roads stayed wet longer than usual, refusing to dry even when the traffic was light. The clouds thickened and lowered, moving much faster than they had earlier in the afternoon. Weather radios began sounding updated alerts more frequently, and aviation bulletins quietly changed their tone from caution to hazardous. But everyday life continued. Parents picked up their kids. Shoppers filled the parking lots. Long-haul drivers started their overnight routes, assuming they could beat the worst of the weather. To most people, it was just another winter evening. What no one realized was that the atmosphere was already aligning into the perfect setup. You had warm air on the ground, Arctic air rushing in aloft, moisture feeding in from the Great Lakes, and barometric pressure falling like a stone. The ingredients were all in place. They were simply waiting for the exact moment to combine. And when they did, Ontario wouldn't just ease into a storm. It would drop straight into one. Before the headlines, and before the road closures, the storm announced itself in quiet, easily missed ways. And the first to notice were the people who lived their lives watching the sky. Pilots were the first to catch it. They started radioing in reports of unusual turbulence on approaches they had flown hundreds of times before. Instruments inside the cockpits showed air pressure dropping rapidly mid-flight. Down on the ground, truck drivers on open stretches of highway felt the crosswinds shoving their trailers much harder than the forecast suggested. It wasn't dramatic yet, it just felt off. At the same time, weather stations across Ontario started agreeing on one specific thing: the barometer was falling fast. And a drop like that usually means only one thing: a storm is gaining serious strength. Meteorologists leaned in closer to their screens. The temperature gradients were tightening. The wind fields were curving aggressively around a developing low. The models were finally converging, and the picture they painted was getting more alarming by the hour. Even nature reacted before the people did. Birds vanished from the open spaces. Dogs got restless and started pacing. The air developed that strange electric stillness that always seems to come right before severe weather, the feeling that the sky is holding its breath. And then the wind changed. It didn't just pick up speed, it shifted direction, signaling the arrival of a much stronger system. The breeze turned sharp and stinging, the kind of cold that bites your skin even through gloves. Street signs started to hum. Loose objects skidded across the frozen ground. What little snow was left from earlier storms lifted into the air, blowing across the roads in thin, ghostly sheets. Those who were paying attention understood exactly what that meant. The atmosphere was reorganizing itself. Most people, though, were still sitting at dinner tables, standing in checkout lines, or scrolling through their phones. The warnings sounded technical, distant, and easy to underestimate. But above the clouds, the storm was already assembling piece by piece, tightening up like a clenched fist. The first signs had appeared. The real impact was only hours away. Every major storm has a turning point, the moment it stops being weather and becomes a crisis. For Ontario, that moment didn't arrive gradually. It arrived like someone threw a switch. Temperatures plunged first. Thermometers dropped 10, 15, then 20 degrees in what felt like no time at all. Breath that had been a faint mist suddenly turned into thick clouds. Wet pavement hardened instantly. Water pooling along the curbs froze solid before it could even drain, forming sheets of invisible black ice beneath a fresh dusting of snow. Then the rain changed. What had started as a cold drizzle crystallized into pellets of sleet that rattled against windows and windshields like gravel. Within minutes, that sleet shifted to heavy, wind-driven snow. It wasn't falling straight down. It was coming in sideways, whipped by gusts strong enough to shake parked cars and howl through the door frames. Audio script. Visibility collapsed instantly. Landmarks just vanished. People looking out their front windows saw nothing but a wall of white where their street used to be. Traffic reports shifted from routine congestion to absolute chaos. Dozens of vehicles slid off on ramps and bridges. Minor fender benders quickly multiplied into massive chain reaction crashes. First responders struggled to even reach the scenes because the snow was piling up faster than the roads could be cleared. GPS maps turned solid red as highways locked up under the weight of stalled traffic and deep drifts. Inside homes, the lights flickered for the first time. Transformers exploded, flashing blue-green over neighborhoods like distant lightning. Branches snapped under layers of ice and heavy snow. In some places, the power went out and simply didn't come back on. People reached for flashlights, extra blankets, and their phones, watching their battery percentages drop faster than usual as the network strained to keep a signal. From the outside, it looked sudden. But in reality, it was the atmosphere releasing hours of stored energy all at once. The flip had happened. The storm was no longer just forming. It was now fully in control. Once the storm took over, the failures didn't happen one at a time. They fell like dominoes. A crash on one stretch of highway forced traffic to a halt. That stopped traffic allowed the snow to pile up around the tires. Buried lanes meant the plows couldn't reach the scene. First responders trying to navigate around the jams just created new backups elsewhere. One problem created the next, and then the next, until entire transportation corridors were completely paralyzed. Black ice turned routine braking into uncontrolled sliding. Bridges, which always freeze first, became danger zones. Semi-trucks jackknifed across the lanes, forming steel barricades that smaller vehicles slammed into before the drivers ever saw them. Tow companies were overwhelmed. "We can't get to you yet," became the most repeated sentence of the night. Then, the power grid began to fail. Ice weighed down tree branches until they snapped like brittle sticks. Those branches took out the lines. The lines took out the transformers. Neighborhood after neighborhood went dark. Without electricity, furnaces stopped running. Without furnaces, indoor temperatures began to fall. Cities opened warming centers, but even trying to reach them was a gamble when the roads were glazed with ice and visibility dropped to near zero. Runways iced over faster than crews could de-ice them. Flights stacked up on the departure boards, all showing the exact same word, canceled. Travelers wrapped themselves tight in their coats and waited on the hard terminal floors while the wind rattled the glass walls around them. Cargo shipments halted. Mail stalled. The supply chains paused overnight. What began as just weather had morphed into a total infrastructure failure. It wasn't that the systems were weak. It was that everything was getting hit at the exact same time. Transportation, power, communications, emergency response, all of them were pushed to their absolute limits by a storm that just would not let up. The province wasn't just dealing with snow anymore. It was managing a full-scale, cascading crisis. Statistics never really capture nights like this. Numbers can give you inches of snow and miles per hour of wind, but they can't describe what it actually feels like to stand in it. To understand this storm, you have to listen to the people who were inside it. A paramedic described driving into a white wall where the world simply disappeared past the hood of the ambulance. "You don't steer," she said. "You aim, and you hope nothing is there." But the calls kept coming. Crashes, chest pains, homes without heat, and every mile forward felt like a gamble. A lineman stood on an iced pole at 2 in the morning, the wind cutting through every layer of clothing he wore. His hands were numb as he worked to reconnect a line coated in shining glass. "You don't think about the cold," he said. "You think about the house at the end of this wire going from dark to light." On a shutdown highway, a truck driver ran his engine in intervals to save fuel, watching the snow drift higher and higher up his door. He shared food with a family trapped in the sedan behind him and used his headlights so they could see. "You realize how long a night really is," he said, "when there is nowhere to go." In a quiet neighborhood, a mother read by flashlight to keep her kids calm as the house steadily cooled down. Next door, an elderly neighbor's porch light was out for the first time in years, so someone knocked just to be sure she was okay. She was, and she wasn't alone anymore. These moments rarely make the news headlines, but they are the storm's true story. Small acts of endurance, fear, humor, and kindness threaded through the longest night of the year. The blizzard may have been measured in snow, but it was lived in heartbeats, one decision at a time. By the time the morning light finally broke through the clouds, the storm had already written its story across Ontario. Buried cars, broken branches, dark neighborhoods, and long, empty highways carved out by the plows. Life began to move again, slowly at first, as people finally stepped outside to see what the night had left behind. There was relief, of course, but there was also exhaustion. And underneath it all, there was a quiet understanding that this wasn't just another typical winter storm. It was a reminder. It reminded us just how quickly normal can disappear. It showed us how deeply connected everything really is. Roads connect to power, power connects to heat, and heat connects to safety. It revealed the incredible strength of our communities, but it also exposed the limits of our infrastructure when everything gets pushed to the breaking point at once. And ultimately, it asked a simple question. If this happened again tomorrow, would we be ready? Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a night like this during a blizzard or an ice storm? What was the most difficult part for you? Was it the bitter cold, the treacherous roads, or just the uncertainty of not knowing when it would end? And tell me in the comments, what is the one item you absolutely always keep in your winter emergency kit? Share your experiences and advice in the comments below. Someone else reading them might need that knowledge one day. And if you enjoy extreme weather storytelling, real disaster breakdowns, and survival-focused content, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with friends and family who live where winter hits hard. Your support helps us keep creating content for people who respect the power of nature and want to be ready for whatever comes next. Stay safe, stay prepared,